documentalista. And I am el documentalista. And this is The Tower of Babel, the Origin of Languages. The story of the Tower of Babel touches on one of the most universal themes of the foundational myth. Religions and ethnic myths often give us explanations about the origins and development of spoken language. Most mythologies do not believe that man is the inventor of language, but they do believe in a divine language that precedes human languages. The mystical language used to communicate with animals or spirits, such as, for example, the language of birds. In the story of the Tower of Babel from the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, God punishes humanity for its arrogance and defiance, exposing man to the confusion of languages. But that punishment at the same time is a gift that not only limits and restricts, but also defines and projects man in his possibilities. A punishment that, like the punishment of Adam and Eve, opens up possibilities to new options. Confusion implies the possibility of learning again, and man must go down that path until he finds the clarity that allows him to overcome hatred and confrontation. Only then will he be able to overcome confusion and learn a new language that identifies him with his neighbor. The Tower of Babel. It was a significant structure mentioned in Judeo-Christianity. It was built by men in ancient times and is often associated with the historical ziggurat of Menanke from the ancient city of Babylon. This building, at the top of which was the Esagila, a temple dedicated to Marduk, originally had 7 stories and was over 91 meters tall. But few of its remains exist today. The Tower of Babel is not only a key building in the Judeo-Christian tradition and mentioned in the Old Testament, but it also belongs to the universal and subjective imagination. Its story has transcended generations, but the legend of the tower rests on a reality. In fact, there was in Babylon a multi-story construction of unknown origin, which was already being restored in the time of Nabopolassar, founder of the Chaldean dynasty. In fact, that construction was called Etemenanque, which can be interpreted as the mansion of the heights between heaven and earth. This agrees with the main interpretations of chapter 11 of Genesis, which state that with the construction of the tower, men intended to reach heaven. An inscription dating from the time of Nabopolassar states that Marduk, the great god of Babylon, ordered me to firmly lay the foundations of the Etemenanque until reaching the underworld and thus making its summit reach the heavens. In another inscription from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, it is specified that the decoration of the summit was made of bright blue glazed bricks, that is, decorated in the color of the sky, perfectly suited to give the impression that the building disappeared into the infinite blue. According to the Bible, God, in order to prevent the success of the construction, made the builders start speaking different languages, giving rise to the origin of different languages. And they scattered across the face of the world. The whole earth had one language and used the same words. The men, as they migrated toward the east, found a plain in the region of Shinar and settled there, and they spoke to one another. Let us make bricks and bake them in the fire. They used bricks instead of stones and bitumen instead of mortar. Then they said, "Let us build a city and a tower with its top reaching to the sky. In this way let us make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the earth anymore." But Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. And he said, "Behold, they are one people and they all speak the same language. Since this is the beginning of their endeavors, nothing will stop them from carrying out everything they set their minds to. Well then, let us go down and there confuse their language so that they will not understand one another." Thus Yahweh scattered them from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there Yahweh confused the language of all the inhabitants of the earth and scattered them over the whole surface. Genesis 11:196. Nimrod, who was the first to become king after the flood, and whom the Bible identifies as a mighty hunter, opposed to Yahweh. He is identified as the mastermind behind this enormous undertaking. Some have tried to identify him with Karukin or Sargon. From here, the founder of the first Semitic empire. Others believe they see in that vigorous hunter the figure of the Assyrian god Ninurta, god of war and hunting, who, like Nimrod, took pleasure in hunting his enemies. Tradition says that since they did not have stone for construction, they dedicated themselves to making bricks, and since they also did not have lime, they used bitumen as mortar. It is not known exactly when Etemenanki, the Tower of Babel, was built, but it probably existed before the reign of Hammurabi. It is believed that the poem about the creation of Babylon in Umayyad was written during or shortly after the reign of Hammurabi, since the poem mentions Esagila, the temple of Marduk, being created immediately after the creation of the world and implies the existence of Etemenanki. The city of Babylon was destroyed in 1686 before Christ. Before Christ by Sennacherib, who claims to have destroyed the Etemenanki. The city was restored by the Neo-Babylonian kings. It took 88 years to be rebuilt. Its central feature was the temple of Marduk, Esagila, which was connected to the ziggurat of Etemenanki. It was rebuilt by Nebuchadnezzar II. The 7 stories of the ziggurat reached a height of 91 meters and contained a temple at the top. The base of this tower would have been a square with sides of 92 meters, and its original height would have been increased during the times of Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar II, to make it a worthy symbol of their power and greatness. Calculations based on other archaeological excavations determined that this step tower could have been between 60 and 90 meters tall. Today, only ruins of it remain, since its construction was made with materials that are very sensitive to the elements. Despite the fabulous images that exist in both literature and art about the famous Tower of Babel, no ziggurat has been found that is fully and completely intact. However, both the ancient documentation in cuneiform writing and the preserved images and archaeological remains allow us to reconstruct some of its characteristics. A ziggurat was a monument with a square or rectangular base built as a high terrace, stepped in several levels. On the topmost level, a chapel or a monumental temple was erected. With the square floor plan as a monument. Made of glazed bricks, driven. One of the ancient accounts that talks about the building was the story of Herodotus when he passed through Babylon in the 5th century before Common Era. The account described the facade of the tower as being approximately 91 meters tall. The building, in a stepped shape, had 7 floors made of walls, with projections undoubtedly vertical. The Segura had a square floor plan, divided into 2 sections and bordered by a large wall. The ascent to each of the towers was done from the outside, following a spiral staircase until reaching the top. The top floor had facilities for worship decorated with blue glazed bricks, imitating the color of the sky. He also tells us that the blue sanctuary at the top was dedicated to the great god Marduk, and he refers to the annual celebration of the renewal of the rain as a result of the contact between God and the king. Built with effort over many reigns, it survived only a short time. Babylon, which fell in 539 under Persian rule, rebelled in 482. Kyrgyz, who brought it back under his authority, took reprisals that caused serious damage to the monument. A century and a half later, in the year 331, Alexander the Great established his capital in Babylon. And when he saw the tower in ruins, he tried to restore it. But it required so much work that he gave up on his project. After that, the tower served as a quarry for the local builders, who reduced it to a mound. A building was constructed on top of it, and when that collapsed, it covered the ruins of the original tower, hiding it for many centuries. The text of the Esagil tablet, dated to the 2nd century before Christ, already describes a deterioration. It specifically mentions the first floor, which reached a height of 33 meters. Despite the majesty of this man-made work, the inevitable and grim fate of the mythical building is still surprising. The account in Genesis does not mention the destruction of the tower at all. The people whose languages are confused simply stop building their city and scatter from there over the face of the earth. However, in other sources, God brings down the tower with a great wind in the Midrash. He said that the top part of the tower was burned, the bottom part swallowed up, and the middle was left to erode over time. In Mesoamerica, there is a story about a man named Koshkosh and a woman named Xochiquetzal, who, after being shipwrecked together on a piece of tree bark, reached dry land and had many children. However, these children could not speak until one day a dove arrived and gave them the gift of speech. But in different languages and in the same way, they could not understand each other. Among the Ticuna people of the Upper Amazon, they say that all peoples were once a single great tribe, all speaking the same language, until one day they ate 2 hummingbird eggs. It's not explained why. And later the tribe split into many groups and scattered everywhere because no one understood what the others were saying. Another story attributed to the ancient Toltecs claims that after a great flood, men multiplied, and then a great tower or sakwale was built to protect themselves in case of a second flood. However, the languages became confused and the work stopped. In his 1918 book, the socialist and anthropologist Sir James George Fraser documented similarities between Old Testament stories, such as the flood, and indigenous legends from all over the world. He then identified a story told in the mythology of the Lozi people, where evil men built a great tower of antennas to pursue creators. Niambe, who had fled to the sky on a spiderweb. The men then got lost when the tower's masts collapsed and everyone flew away. Fraser also cites legends found among the people of the Congo, as well as Tanzania, where men built great towers or climbed enormous trees in a failed attempt to touch the sky or to reach the moon. I am El Documentalista, and this was the Tower of Babel, the origin of languages. Special greetings to Escorpión, Emma Vidosa, The Gamer XD, Gustavo Saldaña, Edith Gutiérrez, Legend 27, Celia Gómez. Real Madrid fans Odalis Villazón, Dylan Pablo, Cristóforo López, Eric González, Nacho Álvarez, David Dazán, Everywhere, Amino, Félix, Jaime Mendoza Rodríguez, Axel, Josué Reinado, Ángel Vargas, Pablo Arias Maflores, Ciro Terrón, Maidana Errejón, Gabriel Coronel, Nayeli Contreras, Paloma Ríos. And wishing his mother a happy birthday. Kevin Guaporro, Paulita Hurtado, Luz de Ángel, Diego Romogama, La Morocha Fernández. Diomedista por siempre, Triol Tetobar, Pico, C. Cheselin, 29 Kevin Burbano, Sarah Quinn, The Scorpion, Rolando García Pacheco, The Urban Zone, Jonathan Alegre, Juliano Caroli, Eric Omar Lara Yoga, Kevin Castillo, Daniela Torres Romero, and Edgar Hugueto Espinosa. Thank you. And until next time.